In the light, the thing that is so centered in me about the light is that it's not three-dimensional space. There isn't yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Right now I'm sitting here talking to Victoria. Yesterday I was at my home in Lincoln doing stuff. Tomorrow I'll be someplace else. In the light, I could be sitting talking to you, being at home yesterday, and going someplace tomorrow, all at the same point in time. And that's hard for people to understand because we live in a serial progression of time. In the light, everything happens in the eternal now. That's the best phrase I could come up with. The eternal now is everything that has happened, will happen, could happen, did happen, is all at the same point in time using English language of the point in time.
Time is different in these realms. Again, we are subjected to time because the earth revolves around its axis around the sun. In these realms, we are going down to a microscopic realm within the mind because everything is within the mind. Within the mind is the universe. Inner space is the same as outer space. There's no difference. When we close our eyes and see that blackness, see that space, within that space is everything, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So when we go into these states of minds, when we go to these places, some of them are within our time frame, some of them are without. In those time frames, in the near-death experience, there's no such thing as time. Because we're not subjected to this thing that goes around the sun, around the galactic center, around the cluster of galaxies. We're not. We're within a quantum level of consciousness, within that field of awareness. So therefore, there's no time at all. There's no space.
And I'm narrating this in a way that it was in a chronological order, but it wasn't. Everything was just in one go, because there's just no time up there. And that's why it's this overload of information that you think must take an eternity for the information that I gained. And it was literally, minutes or seconds that I was potentially there for. Another traumatic part of this was coming back. It's almost like a post-traumatic distress syndrome, was the time period that I was gone. I was literally out for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but I thought I must have been gone for like a wonderful eternity, if not at least 3 weeks. There was so much information that I was understood and gained. The fact that I was still in this club, it just didn't make any sense to me, and I really grappled with that for a long time to understand the absence of time.
And in this beautiful energy of feeling this, there was again just this joy and peaceful awareness that I was there. There's no time. That's an illusion, and it's something that we have here. And yet I try, when I shared this story, to explain that this experience for me was not 18 minutes that they say I was dead. It's a lifetime. It went on, and there was so much depth to it. And yet when I tell it in these linear terms, it's like I was here, and then I was there, and then I was here, and that's not how it was for me in the actual experience at all.
But going back to like being out of my body, and this idea that, oh wow, this is what it means to die. It's just so odd because we're kind of here. So I was still here, but I was on a different, let's say, a channel, a different bandwidth. I was beside this world, but the world still all looked the same, but I was no longer in time and space. I was outside of this slow process that we go through called time. And I was no longer within that. So everything was perceived from like one moment, and my life started to become a review. So as the review goes, the review started out slowly, but then it started to speed up. And then everything started to come into this meshed one moment of time kind of thing.
And the first thing that was so strong is the silence. There was nothing. There was no type of sound. And after that, I started feeling extremely light, like as if I'm floating. The combination of not having any sound at all and like floating, it was so peaceful. It was just amazingly peaceful. And after that, I noticed that the whole concept of time, there wasn't any time. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have a watch on my hand. I didn't have any appointments. I wasn't limited in time. I was just floating there in this place of nothing, complete silence, and feeling very, very light, and no time. The whole time concept completely disappeared. And the feeling was amazing. It was calming. I wasn't afraid. There wasn't any fear. Just a calm, amazing feeling. In that level of godliness, time has no value. There's no value. The past, the present, and the future is one thing. It's a much higher level of godliness. It's a level that we can't understand. We can't understand the concept that there's no past and there's no present and the future. Everything is one thing. So it's way beyond our understanding. The reason why I'm telling you all that is when I left my body, the soul was able to get a much higher level of godliness, that the whole concept of time, there wasn't any concept of time. The past was at the same time of the present. Like the whole concept of time just was not there. That's why I was like seeing her past at the same time as the present.
I think source is more appropriate to use because God is such a loaded term, but the source of all energy was absorbing this universe, including myself, into it. And as I was being pulled into it, I could see every soul of every person that I had ever met and never cared about being pulled into that with me. Now, I was wondering, as this is all happening, first of all, am I dead? And then second of all, if I'm dead, why are all these souls coming back with me? And that's when I realized that the universe, as it was collapsing, with it was the other illusions of space and time. Time does not exist. Time is also an illusion. It's a construct to allow us to have this human experience. And so when I was pulled out of it, when I was removed from the matrix, I was able to see the other souls come with me because time is irrelevant to this. So when I left, everyone left too. The illusion was over. But as we all were being absorbed by the source back into itself, I felt this strong sense of happiness and I guess the purest form of remembering.
In some ways, there's not really much to say because there was simply this blaze and no real sense of boundary. There were no distinctions. There were no other beings. All right. So in many near-death type experiences, people see certain prophets or hear what they call the voice of God or experience many different things. Here it was just this. And it was timeless. There was no, I can't say how long this happened, right? That idea of length is not there because length can only be there when there is a distinct sense of boundary, right? What we call time is the experience of the interval between two successive points, right? So if you have one point and then you shift attention, that interval is what is experienced as time, shifting attention here, then shifting attention here. And so to experience time, there has to be interval. And to experience interval, there have to be two, right? But when there's no clear boundary between one and another or something and something else, then time is not experienceable, right? So this is what people sometimes call timelessness, or people sometimes call, what is it called? Eternity.
It was eternity. You know, here we are by the clock and the calendar every day, living in a linear fashion in the left hemisphere of our brain. Where I went, which is here too, but we don't realize it because we haven't expanded into it yet, is an eternity where it's forever. There is no linear time. There is no clock ticking. There is no calendar. There is this moment. There is the now. So I came in contact with the now. And when you're in the now, God is everywhere. And when I came back knowing that I was going to find out how to be this way here in this reality. and then be there, be here now, knowing this eternity, so that when I die, my body may die, but this part of me that experienced God will go on and on and on.
I had no recollection of anything, anything biological. It's not like you could see something, because your sight is biological. It's necessary here. Hearing is necessary here. Speech is necessary here. It's not there. You just know. You're all-knowing. Everything is a part of you, and it's just so beautiful. It was eternity. It's like I was always there, and I will always be there. That my existence on Earth was just a very brief instant. It's a hard concept to understand, eternity, because when you compare it to time, time requires progression. Things, a sequence of things. Things follow each other. This is all at once, everything. There's no passing from one thing to another. I'd like to call it a different dimension, but can't really call it that, because that could be defined, and there are different dimensions. They have beginnings and ends, and so that doesn't fit.
Light falling on me, what it make me feel at that time, that's the most wonderful thing. That it was so peaceful of an experience, so blissful. I never understood the meaning of bliss before, till I experienced this light. I didn't have no thoughts in my mind. My mind stopped working, and there were no, the word I would use is turbulences in mind, or any questions, any queries. Everything seemed paused. Everything was paused for some time. I don't know how long it happened, because there was no, even time didn't exist at that time. During the experience, I had no concept of time. I don't know how long the experience lasted, whether it was for a few seconds or whether it was for days.
And at the far end of the funnel, there was a wide opening, and then at the far end, there was this tiny, tiny pinpoint of light. And we went through this area, which was like a portal between this dimension and the spiritual dimension. And it was like some great speed, but I kind of, once we went into the funnel, I lost all sense of time. There was no time or space. That's why it's kind of hard to put these things into words, because it just was. And I knew where I was going. I was going home, to the place that we forget but we long to go our whole lives.
Well, another thing that happened really, there is only now. That's another thing I learned. It's only now. There's no past and future, really. It's all now. So be present now. And these are the kind of things that I learned.
There was no place for me to go, no place I wanted to be. I had no sense of my past or my future. In fact, there was no sense of time whatsoever. Everything was happening in the now, and all at once, which was a little bit mind-boggling, but I just loved it.
And I did not understand till my NDE, how could one go backwards and ask for forgiveness? But during NDE, I realized in the other realm, the time is not necessarily linear, but past, present, and future all fuse together and can exist as parallel universes at the same time.
One never stopped being one. One never left the source. One just became distracted and seemingly forgot. So what is the purpose of time? And they say the purpose of time and experience is to help you remember who you truly are, is to bring you back to source.
But the time that I was gone, there was no time. That did not mean one thing. I can't tell you how much time I spent watching the video of myself, but I do know that what had happened was real.
No words were spoken. And when I asked a question, it was answered immediately. It was answered when I started asking the question, in fact. And time there does not exist as we know it. I kept receiving messages at the same time, but separately. And there were 3 messages that I received over and over again. And those were that we are unconditionally loved, that everything's always how it's supposed to be, and that everything will always be all right.
Then there was this bright light. And I tell it sequentially, but I think Jan might understand that all this is happening simultaneously. The human brain processes it sequentially. So, and I describe it as, we'll hear these various, I used to think them very cliche, like a sunset or sunrise, but those are the only, it wasn't like that. But these are the only words I have in English language to explain something that's outside of normal human experience. I don't have the words for these.
It was paradise, but in a different way than I ever thought. I want to stress that it wasn't a dream. It wasn't an hallucination, and I wasn't unconscious. I was fully conscious. I could interact, but I wasn't in that ambulance. It was just so different than a dream. You knew it's different. You just know it's nothing like that. I've been asked how long. I don't know how long it was. Time doesn't fit the element here. It was a while, but I don't know.
There's just no way to talk about it because all of our words are imbued with physical reality. All of our thoughts and our conceptions are imbued with developed in a place in which there's time and space, and in which we can only come to an understanding of things gradually, and in which we can only walk across a floor by taking one step after another. And all of those things relate to the physical reality. And I was in a realm of reality in which there was no time, and in which there was no space, and in which there was no limitation that we experience in this reality. And so therefore, any words that I use, I ask you to please understand, don't relate to the physical words. To see does not mean to see with physical eyes. To hear and to know does not mean to know in the way that we know physically.
Now I was in this loving presence of God for perhaps a nanosecond of time, perhaps an eternity. It is another ineffable problem, trying to describe time in that realm, because time and space, as we know it here, has no meaning on the other side. Now, for the rest of the experience, I would like you to think back to the last time you had a very vivid dream. And in that dream, you were in a particular dream sequence with particular people, and all of a sudden, without any transition, you were in another sequence with other people, and each of these experiences was just as vivid, and you can remember them. It would have to be a very recent dream for you to be able to remember this. I am describing an experience that took place 17 years ago, and I can remember every part of that experience in detail.
And the next thing I knew, I was in this vastness, this described in some literature as the outer darkness, but it was completely illuminated, but there was no light. And I had no body, but I had being, and there was no time and no space and no thing. I had no brain, I had no language, no culture, no heartbeat, but I could think better than I'd ever thought before, as if my brain was no longer in the way of my thinking. And I was in this vast emptiness that extended into infinity in every direction, and I could see in every direction all at once.
Out of the darkness,
as I'm trying to analyze what was going on, I hear a voice. And the voice says to me, relax, this is bigger than you. And when I heard that, I did calm down. I felt at peace, okay. I just don't know. It didn't cure my confusion. I was still very confused. But I felt more relaxed about where I was, and I felt patient. And then an undeterminate amount of time, because there was no time where I was. There was no body. I didn't have a body. I didn't have any awareness of a body, at least, and I didn't have any awareness of time. It was irrelevant. It didn't even make sense, time there.
But then I suddenly found myself in a state of calm and kind of filled with a deep peace, which was at odds with what was apparently going on. And I also went from just seeing the kind of the murky water of this swimming pool to being surrounded by this brilliant white light. And time seemed to stop. I had a sense of complete timelessness. In fact, I have no idea how long this episode took.
In fact, what's happened is that we allow time to rule us rather than the other way around, when in actuality, time seems to be a brain or a mind function. And in the other realm, it really was as though there was no time, or maybe instead of no time, maybe a better description would be all of time existed at the same time. Every point in time existed all at the same time. So what I perceived, what I could interpret as past lives, felt as though they were happening simultaneously, right there at the same time. And what I perceived as future events, like even seeing the doctors come in with the results and seeing that my body was healing very rapidly, all of that felt like it was happening then and there simultaneously at the same time. So there was no separation, no differentiation. And interestingly, it's both time and space. So space was, I was not separated from other things or other people by space. It was like I could be anywhere and I could be at any time. So there I was seeing my brother getting a plane in India, and then I was in Hong Kong watching my family around my body. So space didn't matter, time didn't matter. I was perceiving what appeared to be past life with my brother, future, what was panning out with my life. So space and time, all of that just didn't seem to matter.
Interesting. So if reincarnation really is the way it works, then on some level, right now as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm also a washerwoman in India and a soldier in Germany and a a caveman or whatever whatever I've been. That's all those lives are somehow being lived simultaneously.
Yes, and I believe when people have what we call past life regression therapy or memories, they're not actually accessing that's something that happened in the past. They're able to access it because it's happening right now. And that's why we're kind of able to access these memories, because they're happening right now. And also the whole perception of all of time and all of space existing at once, and it's quite confusing for people. So I use the metaphor of tapestry. So if you imagine like a huge tapestry that's really, really complex, where the picture is a very complex picture with lots of different colored threads woven through. Now imagine if your life is one of the threads, one of the colors woven through, and your life isn't over yet. So you are somewhere along that thread, but the rest of the thread still continues, yet to be lived. So imagine if you're in the near-death state, where you are now not that thread, but you are out of that and looking at the whole tapestry. So you see the whole tapestry completed, which means you see all the other threads, and you see the completed picture. You see your thread, your life. You see everybody who you've touched and everybody who you've yet to touch. You see all the people around you, the parallel, the simultaneous lives, and you see it all woven into this perfect tapestry. You're in the state where you can see everything as though from the outside looking in, and you see the whole completed picture and you see how it all fits in. But when you're living your life, you're one thread in that tapestry. And so but from this near-death state, you're seeing all of time and all of space all at once. But when you're that thread, you're traveling along that one thread. You can't see all the distance of all the other colors and all the threads. It's all a distance away. That's kind of how I try and explain it.
I was immediately taken up into a wondrous, loving presence of light and sound. Indescribably wondrous, indescribably loving, beautiful, serene. It was just washing through my being. It was like being a drop of seawater in the ocean, being part of the ocean, but not being the ocean. Simultaneously, all kinds of things were happening. I had a complete life review of my past, the present, and the future. And I was being flooded through by this light and sound of all kinds of spiritual principles, saw the purpose and the function of every religion on the planet, saw the purpose and function, the orderliness of war and peace, and all of the negativity that we have has a purpose. And I knew that what was true of me was true of every other individual also, that each of us is just indispensable to the Creator. Each of us is like an atom in the body of God.
Now, all this, here we're going the whole spectrum almost of human philosophy and thought, and your own history and future, that all occurred, you said, you used the word simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
All this at once.
All at once.
And then you came back. Were you sent back?
I was given a choice, and I saw the probable outcome of either choice. Either I could go back to the body.
Who gave you the choice?
The presence that was with me.
It spoke to you?
There was telepathic communication going on continuously between us with the life review and with everything that was happening. It was kind of like an osmosis kind of process.
What the universal mind was also doing while it was in its great thought, remember, this time is just one small moment in the totality of what timelessness is. And in time, the universal mind also was creating a velocity that moved from the 12 o'clock point on the clock down to the 6 o'clock point on the clock. The forward velocity moved everything as we know it from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and where we are at now is at 6 o'clock moment of time, and I'll get into that in a moment. But what the 12 to 6 o'clock time of consciousness was a reverse velocity, and I'm sorry if I'm getting a little too technical on any of you here, but it's kind of important that I get this point out. But the reverse velocity element of consciousness. And I'm going to simplify what reverse velocity is. Reverse velocity is this, is let's say in my hand here I had a wine glass, and it was full of wine, and I dropped it. We all know that when I drop that wine glass, it's going to shatter and the wine will spill, correct? What reverse velocity is, and again, this is all proven by science, what reverse velocity is and does is it takes that spilt wine in that broken wine glass and makes it all whole. And from a timelessness, universal consciousness perspective, that is how the universal mind fetus has been conceived and gestated. And right now, we are moving into the point in time where the forward velocity is now meeting reverse velocity. And I know this is a group that's keenly interested in life after life, because right now with the meeting of forward velocity and reverse velocity, it's a very, very unique time. And that unique time is that all of us, at the very essence of who we are DNA fragments of source. We are DNA fragments of the universal mind consciousness. And it was during my near-death experience that I write in my previous books, I call it the second of the Big Bang, was when the universal mind in that fish-like form that it morphed into in the classroom divided itself. I saw it divide itself into a limitless amount of what I call DNA fragments, which at the very essence is what every spirit is. In other words, at the very essence of who we all are, our spirits are source. Our spirits are the infinite. Our spirits, whatever name you want to call it, God or whatever, that's who we all are at the very essence. And this energy, this life force, has never died. It never will die. Okay? In other words, our spirits are fragments of source. We are source at that very essence. We are at a point now in time where forward velocity is meeting reverse velocity. And what I saw during my near-death experiences, during the second of the Big Bang, which I was as clear as I see you, this is what I was observing. I was observing that initial spark of energy that the universal mind, from its timelessness consciousness, its great thought of everything, moved into time, into its female aspect, into its womb. And what it did was it morphed, it just transfigured itself from its whole, that fish-like form, into billions of individual fragments that I call in my books DNA fragments of source. And those DNA fragments of source is exactly who we all are, at the very essence of who we are. At the very essence of who we all are, we are that spirit of source. We are all connected. We are all one because we are all God. And who I am is all of us. And the moment in time that we are at now, where the forward velocities from 12 o'clock to 6 and the reverse velocities from 12 o'clock to 6 in the other direction, okay, going counterclockwise, are meeting. Okay, and as they meet, we as individuals have the opportunity to make a choice as to what we want to do. And we have the choice right now to either stay in the consciousness that we live in the beta frequency consciousness of mind consciousness, or move into the other consciousness that we have. Repeat. Time and timelessness, you want me to start there with the macro in this? The clock of time and forward velocity and reverse velocity. The mind consciousness understands time as a forward velocity that moves clockwise from 12 down to 6, from wherever in the beginning was, the 13.75 billion years to now. But at the same time, universal consciousness was perfecting and creating a reverse velocity consciousness. And reverse velocity takes that spilt wine, that broken wine glass, and makes it whole. We're that spilt wine and broken wine glass right now, right? We have the opportunity to be made whole again, as what reverse velocity is. And when I'm talking about being made whole again, it's being made into the perfection likeness of what universal mind consciousness is. Not only our spirit, which that is, but our soul, our bodies, and our consciousness, to be that wholeness of universal mind consciousness.
And it was a place of absolute knowing. And just like the time didn't exist when I was back in the room, but hovering over my body, time didn't exist here at all either. But it felt like I've tried so hard to find the words to describe some of these pieces because we just don't have a vocabulary for something like this. We don't live our day-to-day lives feeling at one with everything. We don't walk past our mailbox and feel like we're one with the mailbox. It's just not the way we live our lives. So we don't have a real vocabulary to describe these kinds of experiences. But it was as if I was one with everything, and that there had never been anything but being one with everything. And because of that, it felt like, and it gave me this sensation that I could look through the eyes of every single soul that had ever existed through all time and through any experience ever. And that all I had to do was just shift my awareness to something and I would be able to know it. Now, as I was picking up this like sensation that I was connecting to something so big, I wanted to know everything. I remember wanting to know this and wanting to know that, because there was still this part of me that had my individuality. And then there was this part of me that was connected to this oneness, to this everything. And I couldn't ask a question. No matter what I would try to do, I couldn't form a question. All I could do was be curious about it. And it feels to me that when I reflect back on that, the reason I couldn't form a question is because there, everything was already known. It would have been impossible for there to have been a question, because if there was a question, that would mean that something's not answered. And in this place, everything was answered. Everything was already known. Every outcome already complete. And as I was taking this in, I felt myself expanding, if you will, as I was taking in all of this knowing. The part of me that saw all these different experiences when I was in the void, all the different souls, all the different experiences, all the different lifetimes, it was as if you were to take all 7 billion of us here on this planet right now and take a piece of thread, wrap it around the globe, maybe about 100,000 times, take that thread, stretch it out straight, so it would be, what, hundreds of thousands of miles long. Then take one little itty bitty fiber off of that thread, put all 7 billion people of us here right now on that thread, and that would be the equivalent of how long your experience here in this lifetime would be in comparison to your entire soul experience. So that even doesn't come close to comparing it, because it is so, so, so big. It's beyond our comprehension. The connection of oneness, of bliss, of peacefulness in this place is unlike anything I have ever experienced in this physical life. But I understood that it's not that we're trying to get through this physical experience to get to the other side after we pass. It's not like we're trying to check boxes here to get into an afterlife that we ultimately want to have forever and ever and ever. It felt very much like we are learning to bring that bliss that's a part of us at the soul level into our physical experiences.
And things that I would see weren't actually things. It was more like everything was made out of light and everything was alive. It was very real, but in an experience like this, it's experiential. So words don't really say it. There was no time or space, but time and space are built right into our language. And so it sounds like a series of events and that I was somewhere in a place, but it wasn't like that. So I have no sense of how long it was, or because that just didn't exist. We have this idea that the present moment is created by the past. Like, because I got up this morning, I went for a walk, and then I had a bite to eat, and then I did this interview with you, that this interview is happening because of these events in the past. I found out it doesn't work that way at all. It's not a series of events. Everything happens now. Matter of fact, if you look at it the right way, the experience felt like the opposite. The present moment creates the past, which is really weird, but it's true. We can do an experiment right now, and I'll show you. It's like, I'm going to snap my fingers, okay? That snap is now in the past, but it happened now. We create the past by what we do right now. Pretty trippy, but that is true. So when we can find those now moments, that's where we'll find our greatest peace. Create your past with what you do right now.